Let's pop it up there. Yeah, look at that. Marcell Strbich, not for sale. I didn't know anybody thought he was. Well, apparently they did. Marcell put this up on his Twitter X account last night and on Facebook as well, I believe. I will not compromise my mission, values, principles, and beliefs in exchange for my silence. He says that a state central committee member tried to bribe him out of the race for Secretary of State, promising him a job in the soon-to-be Secretary of State's office if he just gets out of the way. Needless to say, Marcell Strbich was not about that. And I wouldn't have expected anything less. But I talked to him yesterday or texted with him yesterday. And I said, Marcell, we need to tell the story. Can you come on this morning? And despite being in the middle of heavy campaigning late last night and early this morning, he carved out a little bit of time for us here. So let's welcome Marcell Strbich back to our program. Marcell, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. Good to be here. And yeah, it was a long night.
It looks like it and sounds like it. And it sounds like it's getting longer. Every day is getting longer now because you're no longer just competing for Secretary of State with your primary opponent, Robert Sprague. You're competing with a machine, maybe, or maybe it was a one-off. Maybe it was just a rogue individual. I don't know, that are doing more than just making you compete with your, with your ideas and your campaign, talking points, but now you've got to deal with people trying to subvert the election process by trying to coax you out of it. Marcell, tell us what happened.
Well, I got a call on Sunday, and the thing is, I've not been asking for anything other than a fair run. For the last year, I've been all over this state. I've been building a grassroots army, Bob, as you know. I've been building enthusiasm, anticipating in 26 we're going to need a candidate that's properly engaged with the voter on the issues of registration, business registration, voter registration issues, and other solutions, right? This is a campaign that's not built on slogans, and it's resonating, right? We saw polling come out in the last month showing we're up 8 in this race. We've got a plus 47 when people know what we're about, all the things in terms of the desire for people to want to vote for this outside candidacy running for Secretary of State in Ohio. And everything's trending correctly. There's important counties that are coming along for endorsements. There's important national, state level endorsements. Right to Life Action recently endorsed us. All of these different groups came together, and I thought, well, you're doing well. You just got to keep grinding this thing out. And I get a call out of nowhere on Sunday, and it's if you've done so well, Marcell, but you're still not going to win. You have zero chance. And, I just don't buy that. And I don't understand why some people feel compelled to try to draw me out to suspend my campaign in the lead up to the May 5th election and try to broker some kind of arrangement where I could work in the Secretary of State's office, I guess, when I'm the one that's petitioning the people of Ohio to decide if they believe I'm the person that could be the executive. And I know I can, and my background and history indicate that I can.
So Marcell, for those who don't know Marcell Strbich, you should by now, because he spent the last 2 years championing election reform in the state of Ohio. And he has worked tirelessly trying to open the eyes of current Secretary of State Frank LaRose to some things that maybe he was not aware of, things that could be done better. Marcell has been on board, like I said, and fighting this fight for 2 years, and now he's been campaigning for many, many months. He is a 20-year retired Air Force intelligence officer, among other things in his career. And Marcell, for 2 years, I've been interviewing you and listening to you and learning from you because you study this better than anybody else. But what really opened my eyes is the last time you and I spoke last month when you were responding to the fraud issues in the state of Ohio. Massive amounts of fraud. And as we are all looking to and waiting for our state office holders to do something about this and tell us when and how accountability is going to happen, and the clawing back of fraudulent funds is going to happen, you stepped up and said, when I'm Secretary of State, I will not only secure Ohio's elections, I will not only clean up the rolls, I will not only make sure that the laws are followed, I will also, and that the office has a role in sniffing out, investigating, and stopping the fraud as well. I haven't heard any of that from your opponent, Marcell, and that's one of the reasons why I think you're resonating with so many people and collecting endorsements left and right. Do you think that's why this offer, if you will, this suggestion that you step away came to you?
Yeah, and there's some other things going on here too, right? The vice president has weighed in on a competitive race, and so it's putting pressure on the Republican Party and some of the grandees who don't like that necessarily, that intervention. I'm talking about the treasurer's race. I think the treasurer, in this case, one of the candidates wants the party endorsement, the other one doesn't. I tend to align with no party endorsements in competitive primaries, especially candidates that are in the lead, or that are resonating with the voters. Why are we working so hard? That suggests something, doesn't it, about my opponent? He's too weak to win on his own. He claims he has the money, but if he has such money, where's the authenticity? Where's his genuine support across the state? I don't know of any constituency groups that are clamoring for him at this time. I do know that he's built relationships, which is natural in Columbus over 15 years. I know that some people begin to form friendships. And so that's not what the voters looking to 44 members of the state central committee to decide for them, right, Bob? They're looking for us to bring forward the strongest candidate to win in the general. That's people's logic. Politicians' logic is different, right? A newcomer introduces uncertainty and risk from their perspective. Because as you can see from yesterday, in my desire to externalize the conversation that happened to me on Sunday, I'm not for sale. I don't need this job. I'm taking this on as a burden, because if we don't address these fundamental issues, where is our state going to go? That's why I was key on bringing these points up about what the Secretary of State can do to look at business registration and identify indicators after the fact of fraud potentially, and then utilize the resources within that office to then work alongside other executive branch offices. And the thought and process is so simple, but it doesn't seem to be exercised because of lack of political will. My opponent's memorizing my lines. He's running with the positions now. He sounds so much like me more and more. I take that as a compliment, but I have no confidence that he has the understanding to execute my agenda. So I'm continuing in this race.
Yeah, repeating your lines and parroting them, essentially stealing them, plagiarizing them is one thing. Having the ability and the willingness to follow through and implement them is another thing. And that's, of course, what I think is resonating with a lot of people. Marcell, I want to share a video here because you're familiar with it. It's one of yours. And I want people to watch this. And I want you to speak to this aspect of the race that you are in. Here we go.
Ohio has a political game of musical chairs. The governor used to be the attorney general. The lieutenant governor was just appointed to the U.S. Senate. The auditor is running for attorney general. The attorney general jumped in, then out of the governor's race. The secretary of state is running for auditor. And the treasurer? First he wanted to be governor. For the right reasons, he said. Then flip-flopped to run for secretary of state. Confused? So are most Ohioans. But you know who's not confused? Marcell Strbich. Combat veteran, election integrity advocate, husband, father. Marcell Strbich isn't a career politician. He's a political outsider who wants one job. Ohio Secretary of State. While Robert Sprague plays political musical chairs, Marcell Strbich is getting results. He's written election integrity legislation introduced in the Ohio legislature. He sued the Montgomery County Board of Elections in the Ohio Supreme Court and won. And he's serving on a national election task force in Washington, D.C. Marcell Strbich is making Ohio's elections safer, while his opponent just waits for the music to stop. Marcell Strbich for Secretary of State. Because actions speak louder than the sounds of political games in Columbus.
Marcell, that is a very, very powerful ad, and kudos for explaining all of that. When we talk about the musical chairs game, we talk about some of these state office holders really not necessarily being interested in that office. It's just the next office because they want to be career politicians. It's a very effective ad, in my opinion. It's also a very dangerous one, because you are literally now just, standing up right in the faces of the Ohio Republican political establishment and saying, I am calling all of you out for this. In order to win, you're going to need some allies among them. And I don't mean in the primary, but I mean in a general election, you're going to need them to get all behind you if you do win this primary. So Tell me about the thinking here, because you are exposing and condemning and criticizing the entire ORP.
Well, I don't think I'm criticizing the entire ORP. I've made clear that there are some individuals within the ORP. I have excellent relationships.
Okay, and I apologize for that.
Yeah,
That may have been a
that's okay. That's right.
mischaracterization. The individuals who are part of the ORP.
Well, Bob, I'll tell you where you're right. In certain instances, some will interpret it that way. Some will institutionalize themselves as though they are. And that has more to do with their mindset. And the problem of that mindset is that they're there to serve the voters. And so some think that they are more informed than the voters. I think when the voters have a chance to decide on their own, we've done pretty well. We have Senator Bernie Moreno. He's rising star in the Senate. He's taken on a number of issues he said he would do. You have now Vice President Vance. If I recall, and I think you do, it wasn't exactly like the red carpet was rolled out over there in Columbus for either of those two gentlemen. And it's very interesting now because they're weighing in on certain things, certain candidates, certain issues. And, I'm watching all of this as a first comer to the scene, not to Columbus, because I've been there many times to bring the cases and issues forward that the people of Ohio and that the president, frankly speaking, has called on Ohio to address for years and hasn't seen results on. So the actions of a few do not parlay necessarily the outcomes for the many, but, I want to get ahead of that. I want them to understand that this would be a strategic mistake to endorse on February 20th when they meet. And why? It has less to do with me, and it has more to do with the voters who have now seen that I am garnering their interests. I am not pushing this forward so to make myself a commodity like many of them do. I think the issue was they assumed I want a job. I want a job, but I want to earn their job. I don't want any job like my opponent. I want to do the job. And that means I have to be the executive because I know that if I'm not, no matter what I say will not necessarily be executed. And that's the difference. And if people had actually known or cared to know what I am about, which they didn't do their research or they assumed or project themselves onto me and said, surely this guy will just take it and we won't have the headache or the burden of doing this. So they need to think very clearly about this. Whether they like me or not, it's neither here nor there. I would work with any and all of them, even though it's obvious that they have rotated these positions for some time. I'm not judging that. Some of these people want to be, and they pride themselves on being in government and having, like my competitor says, he's tried and tested. That's his leading message to people. Yet you can't find a single accomplishment that he led that stood out that people know. And that's why 84% of Ohioans going into the primary don't know who he is. And that's a person that spent millions of dollars. I've spent a tenth of that, okay, off of small dollar donations, no PAC money. And yet, how am I leading by 8 points? And for the voter, do you want somebody who doesn't have that name ID? Who was the lowest vote getter in 2022 out of all his peers? I personally, as a voter, don't want to go in the general with a weak opponent because I understand that the person that's going to be running is going to be aggressive against the Republican. And if he can't handle me and he's got to run to the ORP, then how's he going to handle the Democrat?
That's a fair question. Marcell, going back to the bribe, the coaxing, whatever, the attempt to get you to get out of the race by saying, hey, we'll hire you to work in the office of the next secretary. Are you intending at all to identify that person at any point? And second of all, do you think on whose behalf that person spoke? And do you think this was a message that was being sent by a larger organization to you, or was it a rogue individual who just kind of said, here's something we might be able to do? How are you gonna follow this?
Bob, none of these things in my mind happen in isolation because they're too big of a thing to talk about, or for somebody to have the so-called authority to talk to me about these things. I don't know if this person operates in good faith or not good faith. I did not feel appreciative of the fact that I wasn't asked about this and whether this is something that I thought was desired or wanted on my part. So from this standpoint, I'm not trying to make this person right now the key part of what's taking place. I think that would take away from it, and then it would force the conversation about that person. I'd like to talk about the grander issue of these type of arrangements and how corruptive of an influence it is on us in the state and in our party. And for sure, I'm one of many that's been presented with some arrangement that could be worked out if they walk away from the whole thing. And they just got to know here. People have, I think, dismissed me and taken this candidacy of the people for granted for a long time. They're not gonna be able to do that. I've set my mind to running and finishing the race, whatever the outcome is going to be. And as far as at some point, we'll have to see what the ORP does. Now, if the ORP goes ahead and endorses, I think it'd be appropriate to talk more about it, talk about the involvement of others. But right now, I'd like to see what the ORP does. And I think the position they should take is no endorsement in this race. And I should have the opportunity to run a level campaign without money, extra mailers, discounted mailers going to my opponent, without additional slate cards the party does for my opponent. All that's unnecessary if my opponent truly has the resources to win.
Marcell, I agree, by the way, about no endorsement in this race. Is it the uniqueness of this race that makes you say that there should be no endorsement here? And the reason I ask that is, how do you feel about the way the governor's race has gone, and the fact that the ORP did endorse very, very early on before other people even got in? Because now some of the other quote unquote outsider candidates who are running in the primary against Vivek Ramaswamy are screaming there should have been no endorsement here either. So is there a parallel there, or are they two different types of races? How do you feel about that?
Well, every race is unique in and of itself. In the past, in the Central Committee, they used to package all these races at the Central Committee, and then they'd vote like in one block. I understand they're not going to do that this time. They're going to evaluate every individual race for consideration, which is better, because prior chairman, again, if they keep their word, but prior chairman would basically vote on a slate of races, and then it's a bulk endorsement, and that's so wrong on a number of levels.
I agree 100%.
But things are evolving. Now, as far as that race that you talked about last year, it left a bad taste in a lot of voters' mouths. Now, many people looked at it, and it was multifaceted. It looked like the governor was trying to come in and influence that at the last minute with Jim Tressel, which got folks off the sidelines who normally would never endorse and probably won't endorse or vote to endorse in my race either. And they felt compelled to not see this governor after how many years he's been on top to do that. And so he actually caused the part of that. And then we had the involvement at the national level with the candidate coming in. I don't know all the details of it because I was just starting my campaign, but what I do know is I hear it often on the campaign trail. And I think that a lot of members came out of that with competitor opponents. I think 3/4 of the state central committee has a primary opponents now that they have to run against. So a lot of them are looking at this and saying, what came of that? Was that worth it? Did I ever want to be a part of that? Some have second guessed it. And I think to double down now in a week or whatever, in a week and a half, and do that all over again is really asking for a sizable portion of the Ohio Republican voter to be upset and to potentially not participate in the general 2026 election. And part of my message to them, because I will have 5 minutes to communicate along with my opponent to this body, part of my message will be, think about what the implications of this are very closely. Again, the voters are on knife's edge, and some of them, about wanting to support. And if we don't have the base, which is what I mostly represent, and we don't have, let's say, traditional Republicans that have played a role in the party for many years in positions of authority, and their surrogates, then we can potentially lose the 2026 election in any number of races. And I'm trying to be the guy that uplifts the Republican Party. Again, fair process means if I lose in a fair way, meaning no endorsement, I can come back and say, okay, guys, we gave it our best. Let's all beat the Democrats, and I could be a very unifying force. If that doesn't happen, look, no one's going to listen to me. They're going to be that upset about it. So I'm not going to be able to bring a large block of voters because they're going to say, no, you tried, we respect you, but we're not voting Republican. At that point, it'll be out of my hands. And so from that perspective, this is one of those flashpoints where, at least 23 members of the state central committee need to vote in that first vote and say, we're not going to endorse in the Secretary of State's race. They have to prevail. Because if they don't, I can't predict the outcome, but I don't get the sense it'll be good for Republicans.
I think that's that's a very well argued point, and I hope they are listening to that. Marcell, want to ask one last thing before I announce something, and that is about money. You brought up, the individual who basically tried to talk you into giving up your campaign in exchange for a job, said you can't win, so get out. I assume they meant in the general. You absolutely can win the primary. As you pointed out, you've got a poll that shows you're leading by 8 points, and your name recognition is close to being on par with that of a career guy in Robert Sprague. But in the general, do you have the resources to win a general election fight and make sure that we do have you in that office as opposed to a Democrat?
You know what happens when you win the primary, Bob? You get everybody comes on board. The party unites. It's the same pattern. National support comes in, money comes in, it pours in. So yes, the two candidates, in this case, myself and my opponent, we beat each other up. We spend money. He spends it on mailers. I spend it on this and that. And then what happens is they brought a bunch of new sources of money come in because a lot of donors don't like to even give in the primary. They wait to see who the final person is. So this isn't going to be a question of a lack of resources. And by the way, the current cash on hand I have is more than the so-called leading or presumed Democrat opponent. So this is a false argument that's designed to make the incumbent who thinks has the structural advantage, the nod to give them, the push to become the presumptive nominee based on the variables the party creates for them. So I don't think it's a question of not going to have enough resources. It's certainly not going to be a question of me not working my tail off in the last 5 months from May to November to win, because you can see my work ethic is everywhere. I was in Youngstown last night, going to be in Muskingum County, going down to Southeast Ohio and Appalachia tonight. And I'm going to come back home, and then I'm going to go to Brown County tomorrow, or the day after, for an endorsement consideration. So, I mean, we're going to work that, and that's going to work itself out.
Yeah, your work ethic is really something to behold. You know what your work ethic is? It's that of a combat airman. I mean, that's what you are, and I can tell you approach your campaign the same way you did your job in the Air Force, and that is with 100% commitment and with every single ounce of energy in your body. And I have seen that, which is why, Marcell. And it's funny, you just kind of mentioned people. Not committing resources until primary is decided and so forth. And I've said this to you privately, and I'm going to say it publicly now. I have, in all of the years I've been covering Ohio politics and doing a show, and I've been on the radio in the state for 25 of my 28 years in radio, or now in the podcast world. I've never endorsed in a Republican primary, primarily because you pick your candidate, and then if the other person hears that and they win, I'm never going to have access to them. And as a broadcaster and as a public voice that a lot of people turn to get information, I need to have access to our office holders. And so I've always said I'm not going to pick somebody in a primary only to have that person lose, and now I'm going to be ghosted by the winner because some of them are that petty.
Yeah, sure.
And it's why I wasn't going to endorse in this race or any other. And I'll say this right up front. This is not a personal slight at Robert Sprague in any way. I think he's done an admirable job as a treasurer. But I have decided, because I've been listening to you and talking with you and learning from you, because of your extraordinary knowledge of Ohio election law, quoting chapter and verse, and then with practical ideas on how to strengthen election integrity, I feel like this state needs you. I feel like this state needs you to do the job that a secretary, not just in elections, but in particular that. In the Secretary of State's office, I think we need you. And so I'm kind of breaking from my own personal rule, and I'm throwing caution to the wind here, Marcell. I know you well enough, and I feel like I've learned from you enough to know that you are the person that I'm going to vote for, and you are the person that now has my full and total endorsement for Secretary of State. So I just want you to know that, and I want to make that very public.
Thank you. I recall you being right there at the beginning with me in Medina, and you're right. You're a loved figure because of your consistency, your dedication to reporting on the issues, and people continue to benefit from the knowledge you bring all of us as you follow these contemporary issues, and you take us from one segment of what's taking place in our lives. And I'm going to continue to trust you as well, Bob. And I hope that as you embark in this regard in your new course with this platform, that you continue to see success, and people will know that they can come to this network, and they can hear you, and they know they're going to get straight talk. So thank you. It's a privilege. I know that didn't come without real deliberation, and I will not let you down. I will not let these listeners of yours who've gotten to know each other and know us through these interactions. We need strength. We need character. We need backbone in these positions. That is the one way we will restore integrity across our government. So thank you. It is my honor.
And those are the things that you have in great volume: strength and integrity and backbone. And that's the reason I feel this way. Marcell Strbich, thank you. I appreciate you coming here to talk to the folks here. And obviously, we'll have you back many, many times, and hopefully over the course of several years as you report back to the constituents who made you Secretary of State in the state of Ohio. Thank you, Marcell.
God bless everybody.
All right. There you go. That's Marcell Strbich. He is an amazing individual and somebody that I am indeed proud to endorse in this race. It's not something that I considered lightly, as you just heard him say, and as I explained. And I'm very, very hopeful as I roll this dice from an influence standpoint. That if things don't go that way, and that, Robert Sprague happens to be the next treasurer of the state of Ohio, or excuse me, he is the treasurer, the next Secretary of State in the state of Ohio. I hope that, he still says, yeah, I need to reach the constituents. I need to reach people, and I'm going to go to the places where people can hear what I need, what needs to be said. And I hope he will, would come on and understand that. But like I said, some politicians and candidates, and including incumbents, are petty. And I certainly hope, that either one of these guys would be like that, and that they would still want to be heard on a program that people trust, that they come to for fair questions and answers, sometimes debates, but also, most importantly, getting the policy answers that the American people, or in our case, the Ohio people, want. So I'm doing that. I'm endorsing Marcell Strbich for Secretary of State, and I think he's the best man for the job, and I think Ohio needs him. I really do. And I hope that doesn't, like I said, ruffle too many feathers, but it is what it is.